Superman is back. It's been over a decade since our last solo Superman film, and not only that, but this is the intro to a new DC cinematic universe, a world of gods and monsters. So naturally, the power scaling is going to be pretty important, as this is a character who's going to go on to lead the Justice League and possibly even fight multiversal threats and new gods. So let's see how strong this first entry made him, and I want to do it in a very fun way, as I'm going to put him up against some of his most popular homage / rip-off characters in sort of a gauntlet style video. Note when I say rip-off, I'm not saying the characters are bad or they're very poorly written. I'm just saying rip-off because it sounds better than homage. I know some of these characters are intentional like subversions of the Superman trope or character. So this is just for fun, to be honest. So if that sounds interesting to you, then be sure to subscribe to the channel. We're on the road to 100,000 subscribers, and I think it's a goal we can realistically hit by the end of the year. Let me know what topics you want to see in the comments down below, and be sure to like the video, as it tells me, you like the type of content. So with that being said, let's see how strong this version of Man of Steel actually is. So firstly, let's put him up against Homelander. This is sort of the character who's seen as like the benchmark for all characters in fiction, to be honest. Like, if you're weaker than Homelander, you're cooked. But let's be fair to him. Let's see how strong he actually is and compare him to some of the stuff that Superman's got. And luckily for us, seeing as how Homelander is a weak character, he doesn't have too much for us to go over. Pretty much Homelander's best scaling would get him in the large town to low city level ranges. Firstly, he's a character who's just stated in guidebooks to be able to level cities in minutes. And seeing as how this is a character who resides in New York City, you would need to have casual city block leveling power. This is pretty consistent with some of his durability showings, as a teenager, he was able to survive this factory explosion, which gets anywhere between large building level to even city block, with one bad calc apparently getting it to small town. But large building city block, that's fine. It's actually more consistent as well, seeing as how he scales the Soldier Boy, a character who can no-sell his final explosion, which also finds itself to be in those city block level ranges. I want to point out this is a casual durability showing, and yes, even though Soldier Boy is knocked out, this is due to the fact that it takes a lot out of him to shoot these blasts, as when we see his body after the fact, there's basically no damages on him. Soldier Boy isn't as strong as his son Homelander, so yeah, hence why he scales this high. There's also the fact that we have characters in this verse such as Billy Butcher, who state that characters that Homelander is superior to would at least need hydrogen bombs in order to kill them. This inherently implies that Butcher doesn't think that a regular atomic bomb wouldn't be able to do the trick, such as something like the ones that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So it's safe to say that most of the high tiers in the verse would be in those large town level ranges, with them pushing city level at best. As for Homelander's speed, it's also a little bit contentious, but I think it falls anywhere between massively hypersonic to relativistic, as Homelander has very casual hypersonic showings, such as when he outsped an explosion to save Billy Butcher, as well as him implying that he can fly into outer space, meaning that he can reach escape velocity. As for the higher end interpretations, once again, they just stem from people that he's superior to, such as Soldier Boy, who has multiple showings of him dodging and reacting to light-based attacks, granting him relativistic scaling. So with Homelander's physicals and speed covered for the most part, how does the new Superman compare to him? Obviously, this section is going to have spoilers for the new Superman film, so, be warned. But anyways, Superman easily can stack up with Homelander level characters. Starting off with some of his quantifiable calculations, he scales to the kaiju from the new film, and I want to point out that he wasn't bloodlusted, and he was explicitly trying not to hurt it. Even then, he scales to said kaiju. This is important because due to this guy's sheer size, he would be in the building level ranges, and his fire has been calculated to output as such. Superman during this instance, destroys a water tower to a large building level yield, just with a casual toss, not bloodlusted. So yeah, he's already a high tier if he was in the boys verse. But anyways, moving to some of his durability showings, at the beginning of the film, it stated that 3 minutes ago he lost a fight to the Hammer of Bulgaria, and during this instance he's knocked from Metropolis all the way to Antarctica in the span of around 3 minutes. I'm assuming that Superman got punched over there. I don't see him just running away from a fight, but even if he ran away to retreat for a second, due to the massively hypersonic speed that he was either tossed or flying at, and he's able to endure a crash relative to 59 tons of TNT, which is enough energy to level a city block. So already Superman has very casual large building to city block level showings, but we can easily get him much higher, as in the prequel novel it stated that his freeze breath is relative to the concentrated power of a typhoon, seeing as how typhoons and hurricanes are pretty synonymous for one another. The average hurricane releases large town levels of energy just in the span of a single day, and Superman's freeze breath is just stated to be that entire power concentrated into a single point. So yeah, that's some large town level scaling that Superman gets just by breathing at his enemies. But if you think this is hyperbolic for some strange reason, it's actually supported in the film, as during the latter point of the second act, he's able to use his freeze breath while still weakened to repel himself from a black hole. Now I want to note that he's not in it, he doesn't fall inside of it, but he's extremely close to it, and he's still fighting off its gravitational pull. I couldn't find any quantifiable calculations, but seeing as how we have this instance from Invincible Season 2, where Omni-Man's able to pretty much do the same thing, that gets up to around mountain level. And yes, I know it's not the same feat, but what Superman did here was much more impressive. He was closer to the black hole, and he's able to pretty much sneeze himself away, whereas Omni-Man was slowly just flying away from its pull. So Superman, unironically, is already a mountain buster in the DCU, meaning just by breathing he should be able to beat Homelander. But power doesn't mean everything if you can't hit your opponent. And well, Superman has the speed to back it up. Once again, he was either launched at massively hypersonic speeds by his twin, or he was able to fly at said speeds. But anyways, during the fight with Ultraman, he's able to react to his laser beams, granting him relativistic scaling. So using this low-end Superman, he's relative in terms of speed, but he's way stronger than Homelander, so yeah, he would beat Homelander. I mean, at this point, who doesn't? But let's move on to his next opponent, who's more than a little stronger. For this section of the video, I'm going to go over two Superman-esque characters, being Hancock and Metro Man. Firstly, starting off with the weaker, we have Hancock, a character who can throw whales to a small building level yield, but you know, let's not talk about garbage like that. We just had a 3-minute section dedicated to Homelander after all. Hancock is really here due to the ending of the film, in which he was able to draw a heart on the moon. He was able to create the crater in a really quick manner of time. Even though, despite the fact that people didn't notice the moon until Hancock told our main characters to look up, some people have asserted that it took him like a year or a day or a month or something insane like that. But personally, due to the fact that nobody noticed it until Hancock told our main characters to look up, I'm inclined to think that this feat took Hancock a couple of minutes at worst. So to start to quantify the actual feat, the actual polarization and fragmentation on the moon is actually continental, but assuming Hancock did it over time, like specifically between 1 hour to 1 minute, Hancock would have to possess casual large islands, even country level attack potency. As for his speed, he would be in those high hypersonic ranges, as firstly he was able to get to the moon, so he's able to fly at escape velocity, but I think at best you could kind of argue that he's possibly relativistic based on the fact that he made this crater on the moon and was able to travel back to Earth in a time frame before anyone even noticed what he did to the moon, so that's a pretty quick manner of time. So yeah, Hancock is around large island to possibly continental, with anywhere between high hypersonic to relativistic speeds. But upping the ante, we got Metro Man from Megamind, everyone's favorite Superman-esque character. And honestly, I think that's a guy who's scaling that I think that I had a pretty good part of, redefining. A lot of people thought that he was this building level fodder, but I kind of twisted that on top of its head. So with that being said, let's get into his scaling. Firstly, Metro Man is stronger than his doppelganger Titan, a character who has city block level showings, as well as a town level showcase. So Titan being scared and trying to run away from Metro Man, meaning he gets that scaling as a baseline more than likely. But moving on to Metro Man's own scaling, one of the writers for the original Megamind film stated that if the concentrated solar powered gun that Megamind was gonna hit Metro Man hit him, it wouldn't have killed him. A sentiment that's actually pretty consistent with the film, as later on Megamind at Metro Man's memorial says that he doesn't even think it would have worked. Seeing as how this gun is powered by the concentrated power of the sun releases multi-continental amounts of energy per second, and seeing as how we're using on-screen time, this gun would have been powered by 134 seconds worth of the sun's power, meaning that this blast would have been equivalent to 11 exatons, and Metro Man would have been able to survive it, putting his durability in the multi-continental range. It's almost moon level. And as for his speed, it's probably the most impressive thing about him, seeing as how he's able to perception blitz Megamind, a character who can react to lightning. And in the span of less than a second to Megamind, Metro Man was able to spend a pretty much whole day reflecting on his life, reading multiple books, eating at diners, flying a kite, and still come back before Megamind could even notice what happened. So just remember, Megamind can react to lightning, lasers, and he can arguably perceive flying at interstellar speeds. So the fact that he could perceive and react to all that, but he was pretty much clueless when it came to Metro Man's actual true speed, that's some easy MFTL plus scaling that Metro Man would get. So with the scaling of both of these guys out the way, how does the new Superman compare? In order to get Superman to stack up to this level of power, we're gonna have to talk about some feats and director statements. Firstly, we have the more impressive feat when Superman is in this pocket universe, as he's submerged in an anti-proton river. And for those of you guys who don't know, when an anti-proton meets a regular proton, just 1 gram of the stuff colliding with another gram of the other stuff results in a surge of energy equivalent to 43 kilotons. That's pretty much double the nukes that we dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki right there. And once again, pretty much all of Superman's body is submerged in the stuff. And seeing as how he was weakened during this instance, I don't think it's too crazy to say that he could have survived being submerged in it if he was at full power. Superman's actors are around 108 kilograms, so just doing the conversions, and it's been found that Superman, if his whole body were to be submerged in this stuff, would be tanking 4,646 megatons worth of energy, which is roughly 4.6 gigatons of TNT, which is enough power to destroy an island. This is a pretty good scaling chain that we've got going on, but unfortunately it's not powerful enough to really stand up to Hancock or Metro Man. So for that, we're gonna have to talk about some of James Gunn's statements, as during an interview when asked if Superman could travel back in time akin to Donner vs Superman, James Gunn went on record to say that he would fail in just turning back time, but he would just succeed in rotating the earth around. Seeing as how James Gunn talks about Donner vs Superman specifically, it's safe to say that he's using this scene as a reference for what Superman could, perform. And when calculated, it's been found that this feat or instance right here will be equivalent to 4.34 to even as high as 10.2 exatons worth of TNT. So Superman, just by flying, outputs more AP than anything Hancock could ever hope to perform. But in terms of Metro Man, that's a little bit more contentious, as Metro Man is implied to narratively no-sell similar ranges of power, and there's also the fact that more than likely Metro Man is indeed faster than Superman. If only there was a way for us to buff the AP as well as speed for DCU Superman. And oh wait, there is Blue Beetle. As yes, despite this film's canonicity being really contentious at this point, James Gunn has asserted multiple times that he's the first DCU character, and though it's not 100% canon, as Creature Commandos is the first main canon project in this new cinematic universe, it's safe to say that due to director statements, the events that we saw in this film happen one-to-one as in this new DC universe. This is important because during this instance, a Green Lantern ring is able to divert the course of the Scarab, a weapon that's shown to just bust through planets when flying through it. So Green Lantern rings can no-sell the AP of just planets exploding. And we know that there's a Green Lantern in the new Superman film, and it's stated multiple times that Superman is the strongest metahuman in history. It's a sentiment that's stated in the film or in the verse multiple times, and it's something that's confirmed via word of God. So yeah, Superman is a planetary character. But how about his speed? Would it be fast enough for Metro Man? I'm not sure, but we can talk about some of his speed ends, as Superman should upscale any showing that his cousin Kara has, and she's a character who's able to fly from a red star inhabited planet back to the planet Earth in the time that she's still drunk. According to Google, being drunk lasts around 6 hours, so just using that time frame and plugging it with the nearest red star that is closest to Earth, and it's been asserted that Kara would have been flying at speeds comparable to 6,000 times faster than the speed of light at a low end, to even as high as nearly 40,000 times the speed of light, with these showings being based on whether you think she took anywhere from 1 hour to 6 hours. So Superman could potentially be 40,000 times faster than the speed of light, as well as a planetary character. He might have the AP to put Metro Man in the dirt at that point. So with that being said, let's move on to the next part of this video. Finally, I'm going to go over Omni-Man, a character who a lot of you guys like, and I just want to say I'm going to be going over his television scaling because that's the version of the character you guys are the most familiar with, and I feel like going over his comic book scaling will kind of clash with the tone of the video. Here I am scaling characters that, stem from films and television, and here I am scaling comic books. It's like, at that point, why don't I talk about Sentry, Hyperion, Goku, So let's just keep it to television and films today. But anyways, Omni-Man is very easy to scale in the television show, as a baseline, he's able to divert a meteor the size of Texas, which would yield anywhere from multi-continental to even moon-level results at a high end. The lower end is pretty consistent, seeing as how just by flying over the planet Flaxen, he's able to generate dust clouds that are in the multi-continental ranges. But if you seek more consistency in the moon-level ranges, Omni-Man more than likely at this particular moment in time scales to his son Mark. Some people believe that Mark is stronger than his father at this point. But whether you believe that or no, it's not really relevant, because seeing as how Cecil references Conquest, the climactic villain of season 3, to be stronger than Nolan, it still establishes that Omni-Man, whether you think he's weaker or stronger than Mark, is still a relevant character in terms of, the high tiers. So with that being said, he'd scale to pretty much anything Mark has performed, at least to some capacity. This is important as Rexplode jokes that part of Mark's regimen was bench pressing the moon. Obviously this is a joke, but Word of God confirms that Mark would actually be capable of performing this during that time period of his training. That gets obviously into those moon level ranges, pretty deep into it as well, and just stacking the set multiplier of him being 138% stronger by the events of the first episode of season 3, and Mark would actually be a small planetary character. Omni-Man should scale to this for very obvious reasons that I've pointed out, so by extension he's also a small planetary character. Obviously now for Omni-Man's speed, this is a little bit more contentious, as you have his infamous showing of flying to another planet in a different galaxy in the span of a month, which would yield MFTL plus results. But the thing is that the show is kind of like the comics in the sense that MFTL speed might be only something that scales to his characters in space, and while that's never stated in this continuity like it is in the comics, there's certainly anti-feats in the show that make this sentiment possible, such as Mark traveling from the moon and back in a span of like 30 seconds or so. Pretty fast, but not MFTL plus. But if we want to find how fast these characters are on planetoid objects, I think it's best to use an instance during the first season where Omni-Man and Mark are throwing baseballs around the planet, which comes out to around relativistic. Mark got blitzed by Omni-Man, so Omni-Man is more than likely an FTL character at worst, pretty casually as well. And though these stats are impressive, they just are not compared to Superman, who's still a planetary character. While Omni-Man as of currently is only in those small planetary ranges, maybe a bit higher, maybe a bit lower, I don't know. But it only gets even worse for him, as if we dive into the semantics of this blue scarab planet bust, the same stuff that Green Lantern rings can no-sell, it's been determined that this thing packs around dwarf star level amounts of power. So if we use that, it doesn't matter which version of Omni-Man I use, comics or television, as even in the comics, the best real feat you'll have is 3 Viltrumites performing a planet bust, whereas Superman just upscales weapons that can do that casually. And there's also the fact that speed is not an issue once again, as Superman is just faster, believe it or not. As while I believe Viltrumites can attain higher speeds when they're not hindered by the atmosphere, this is going to be on a planet, so Superman is likely just blitzing and one-shot Nolan. So yeah, we've made it to the end of the gauntlet, and I hope this was fun because I got to go over some of Superman's new scaling, and I got to compare him to a whole bunch of other characters. But anyways, I'll see you guys next week with a new video. But until then, as always, stay Big G fans.